Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm just having a little bit of trouble with my tech, and I'm not sure, can everybody see the PowerPoint screen that is currently being shared? If you can, please raise your hand or drop a yes into the Q&A. Yes, most people. Excellent. Wonderful. That is good news. Thank you for your patience. It is after 1 o'clock, so we will make a start. Welcome to the introductory webinar for the ACT Child Safe Standards. We are online as a webinar today, and you will have noticed that your sound and picture have been turned off. I do have the Q&A function running and the chat function running, so you are welcome to pop a question or contribute into the chat at any time. We have a pretty small audience today, so I would love it if you wanted to drop into the chat what sector you are from, and that way along the way hopefully I can pop some examples or ideas that might be relevant to you. We are going to be recording the session today, and it may be published on our website for others to access later. So if you have any concerns with that, please reach out to me. But if you would like a copy of today's presentation in terms of the PowerPoint, you are welcome to contact our team at the conclusion of today's webinar. So before I start, I would like to do an acknowledgement of country. I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of these lands and pay my respects to elders past and present. I also acknowledge the emerging leadership capacity of First Nations children and young people and the importance of culture in giving their lives strength and meaning. I also acknowledge the enduring connection to country of all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and the ongoing impacts of dispossession and colonisation, recognising that their rights to these lands have never been ceded. I would also like to acknowledge the survivors of childhood abuse. That includes the adults, children and young people who have experienced harm in all their forms, generally by those entrusted to protect them. I recognise the courage of survivors of institutional sexual abuse who shared their experiences with the Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Abuse, with the hope that all children will be protected, believed and safe. The Royal Commission underpins a lot of what we do, and it is the foundation in which the child safe standards come from. Of course, on that note, today we will be touching very lightly on the theme of child abuse, and therefore it's important that you look after yourself. So if at any time you feel like you need a break or are unable to participate, that is okay. Please feel free to log off or reach out to us later if you would like more information. My name is Gemma. I am a Senior Capability Development Officer working on the Child Safe Standards at the ACT Human Rights Commission. I work for the Children and Young People Commissioner, who is Jodie Griffiths-Cook. Now, Jodie is an independent statutory office holder, and one of her functions as the Commissioner is to promote the implementation of the Child Safe Standards. Our team is also led by Roseanne Nash, who's the Senior Director. Unfortunately, Roseanne is not with us today. You can contact our team at any time through the email actchildsafe@act.gov.au. But don't worry, I'm going to put those contact details up again at the end. Okay, so today this is an introductory webinar. So we're going to cover off the basics of the Child Safe Standards scheme, and we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to be a child safe organisation. And that includes some fundamental principles that support your organisation to be child safe. We then will take a look at the standards themselves and what your organisation needs to know, and some just tips for where to get started and where to find support. Okay, so some basics. The Child Safe Standards Scheme commenced on the 1st of August 2024, and as I mentioned before, the standards do mirror the national principles for child safe organisations. Those national principles did come from the Royal Commission, and they have been legislated in many states and territories across Australia now. So we are not unique, and there is much work going on across the country in this space. Now, here in the ACT, the scope is very broad, so organisations that provide services for anyone under the age of 18 are required to commence implementation of the standards. There are 10 standards, and we're going to get to them in a little bit later, but the kind of fundamental point is that those standards are interrelated, and their primary purpose is about setting and changing institutional culture. So it's not a set of, prescriptive rules or a checklist to complete. The standards apply to organisations. So that's about the practices and conduct that happens by staff and volunteers in your organisation and in institutions, and it's about preventing abuse that happens there. So it is in addition to existing requirements around child abuse reporting and harm within the home environment, which we refer to as child protection, and many of you will be familiar with through things like mandatory reporting. Important also to note that the standards cover all forms of abuse and harm and not just child sexual abuse. Now, the ACT legislation is very broad, and it intends that organisations are able to apply and implement the standards in a way that sort of suits their business, so based on their size, the risk, the level of contact with children. And we would like organisations to take a continuous improvement approach. We are focusing on really supporting you in your organisation to get started and to make progress, and we recognise that it's going to look a little bit different for every organisation. Now, as I mentioned, the scheme is part of the broader protective framework for child safety here in the ACT, and it complements other existing child safe mechanisms such as the Working with Vulnerable People scheme and reportable conduct. There are no separate compliance or reporting mechanisms for the child safe standards, and we are working with the existing sector regulators on monitoring how organisations are going with implementation. So the aim for the child safe standards, recognising that there was already a lot of legislation and reporting and record keeping required, is not that we're going to duplicate or make you, submit reports or replace existing regulatory or reporting processes. Now, as I mentioned at the start, I work for the Human Rights Commission, and the Human Rights Commission, through the Children and Young People Commissioner, is the organisation that has responsibility for promoting implementation of the standards. We are focused on awareness raising and working with the existing regulators to ensure that organisations and sectors are ready to start implementation. Over time, this may change, and we will be progressively identifying those organisations and sectors who need a bit more support. But for the first 5 years of the scheme, there isn't a kind of formal compliance mechanism. Okay, so the ACT is a human rights jurisdiction, which means that there are statutory legal protection of human rights in the ACT. Now, it's no surprise that the ACT Human Rights Commission is responsible, and that is because that the child safe standards have been introduced through the Human Rights Commission Act. So that means that child rights underpin the child safe standards scheme. And in this sense, we are slightly different to some other jurisdictions, like New South Wales, who have aligned their child safe standards to things like working with vulnerable people. So what does it actually mean? Well, the Convention on the Rights of the Child came into force in 1989, and it is the most widely signed and ratified human rights treaty in history. The Convention has 4 guiding principles, and that is non-discrimination, the best interest of the child, the right to life, survival and development, and respect for the views of the child. So when we take these principles, we can see that they're directly relevant to the Child Safe Standards scheme. So we need to recognise that children and young people are rights holders. Their rights must be recognised, respected and protected. We need to focus on genuine, safe participation. And we need to make sure that we're thinking of those 4 principles like their best interest when we are implementing the standards. Under the standards, of course, participation is one of our standards, and it is also an important underpinning principle. And that includes considering children's evolving capacity and thinking about how we can create opportunities for children and young people to participate and exercise their rights to have a say. And this is, varied for different organisations. If you're working with very young children, it is still possible to engage children in discussions about safety and decision making, and part of the role of the standards is to help you and ensure that no matter what age and cohort you are working with, this becomes a fundamental principle. Now, in terms of scope, the scope is set out in the Human Rights Commission Act, and it includes all providers of services for children and young people. So it's not a definitive list. There isn't a in and out, but it basically says even if you are providing services for children and adults, you are still covered by the scheme. So when you look at the slide, we have mapped out some that are otherwise explicitly listed in the Act and examples that have been used when the legislation was passed, and it is very broad. So we've got from emergency services, schools, things like sports and clubs and association, dance, of course, churches and religious organisations, transport services, and then a bunch of other kind of commercial services like children's entertainment centres, commercial venues. I also just want to quickly point out that in the Child Safe Standards Scheme, the standards apply at the organisation level, and what that means is that anybody who's working with that within that organisation needs to be aware of and take responsibility for implementing the standards. So it's not like the Working with Vulnerable People scheme where it's only those people who are, directly interacting. It is in the organisation. So everybody within that organisation needs to be aware of these. So the why behind the Child Safe Standards is that what we want is for organisations to become what is known as a child safe organisation. Now this concept does also stem from the Royal Commission, and what it says is that a child safe organisation does three key things. Firstly, it creates a culture and environment where children and young people's safety and well-being is at the centre of thoughts, values and actions. So that is, we're putting children and their safety and well-being first, before anything else. It is also an organisation that places emphasis on genuine engagement with and valuing of children and young people. So again, that's the children's participation. And then thirdly, it's an organisation that creates conditions that reduce the likelihood of harm occurring to children and young people, increase the likelihood that harm would get detected if it was happening, and ensures that any harm that is detected is responded to appropriately. So the standards can help guide you through these key three actions and help you to become child safe. Now, a child safe organisation is also one that is child friendly and child aware. And this is because for children and young people, feeling safe is the same as being safe. So we can't have an organisation where we as adults have gone and created as many structures and policies and processes to keep children safe if they then are in a place where that makes them feel afraid or uncomfortable. So being child friendly is about creating our services that are welcoming for children, where they feel valued, respected, listened to, and they feel safe and comfortable. So one of the key ways of doing that is that we and our staff are putting children's experience first and making them feel safe and feel like what we are doing is not just to them, but for them and with them. So in a really basic concept, this can look like things like having, small sized furniture and, we've got the things that they need on shelves that they can reach. They don't need to ask for help. And it also means things like making sure that our written materials or the way that we communicate with a child is in simple language or using visuals, and it's child friendly. So it's given to them in a way that they can understand. Child aware is where services and organisations consider the caring responsibility of adults and take this into account when they're working with parents and carers. So this recognises that the safety for a child is partly linked to their safety at home, and that parents and carers provide a key role in keeping children safe, both when they're at home but also when they're out in the community. Children generally will choose their parents as their safe person to speak to if something is happening to them at school or at a club or out in an organisation, and therefore we need to make sure that we're being child aware. So we're communicating with our families our approaches, and we're taking into account their needs. So things like making sure that we're not booking appointments with a parent right on 9:30 in the morning when we know that they need to be at work. Or we're not scheduling it at 6 o'clock, which is going to be dinner time for many parents with young children. And I guess child aware is really about recognising that a children and young person's needs and their well-being exists within the broader context of their family circumstances. Okay, so now you know a little bit more about the intent of the Child Safe Standards. I invite you to take a moment to think about what are some of the things your service or organisation can do or is doing to be child safe, child friendly and child aware. Or what do you think children and young people would say about your organisation if you asked them, is it child safe or is it safe here? So we'll just take a minute. You're welcome to just reflect quietly on your own, or you can post into our chat. If you're willing to share, you don't need to list the name of your organisation. Okay, I haven't had a lot of posts in the chat, but that's okay. Hopefully we've all taken a minute to digest and have a think. We will move on. So the next little section, we're going to talk about some research around child safety because it can really help to get a picture of the importance of this work. So firstly, some research about adults, about us. Now, the research tells us that in a lot of cases, the actions of adults are actually making it less safe for children. And that is because adults are often unaware of what is happening around them, or they downplay something they've seen or the risk, or they're unsure how to respond. So we do see this with cases that pop up in the media. You know, there's always an interview where an adult or a colleague of somebody who has been identified as harming children says, oh, they felt like they were a bit off, or, you know, that person was a bit strange, but I thought it probably was nothing, or I don't want to, you know, I don't want to ruin their reputation. It is important as adults that we are noticing and trusting our gut and not assuming that everybody thinks and acts like we do. We need to recognise that there are additional layers of vulnerability for children and young people, and we have power as adults. So we are in a position of authority and we need to make sure that we are using that for positive. Children often will minimise their own concerns. They may blame themselves, or they may just have a limited understanding and experience of things that are wrong, or how to speak up and say no. But the reality is that children do know what is real, and it's our job as adults to be ready to listen and not just with our ears. We need to make sure that we are helping children to be safe, and we are making sure that if we identify or if a child says something to us, that we are taking action. So we're not downplaying those small things, and we're not creating further barriers for a child to speak up and tell us about something that's happening. All right, so when we asked children and young people, what does a child-safe organisation look like? It is interesting because many of them identified those same characteristics about adults. So they want adults who are going to respect them as experts in their own life. They want to be able to talk to adults without feeling minimized or being compared to others. And they want to be genuinely listened to and believed. Children also spoke about wanting environments that are warm and welcoming and having staff that are kind and reassuring. Now, as I said, the children were able to articulate what a child-safe adult is. And according to children and young people, they need somebody that they can trust and someone that values their opinion. They need to be able to discuss their worries with us and understand those things that might be making them feel uncomfortable. Children and young people will probably test us with low-level information before they will talk about more serious matters. So they need somebody who is willing to have conversations that might be uncomfortable. As I said, young children in particular might be confused about what is happening, about the behaviour of others, and they may not be able to articulate exactly what is wrong. Oh, I've just noticed we seem to not have our PowerPoint. Oh dear. Are we back? Can we do some, yes, thank you, back now. Apologies for that. I'll just flip back so that you can be certain that you can see it. So as I said, we've run through some research about adults, and then I did throw up some information about child-safe organisations, and we were just starting to talk about what a child-safe adult is to a child. So as I was saying, the children want us to be the adults who are willing to have a conversation that might be uncomfortable. And this is part of the reason why standard 2 is critical. So this is this engagement with children and listening to their voices, because if you are consistently showing a young person that you don't take their small worries or their opinions seriously, or you show them that you are uncomfortable talking about sensitive things like bodies, then they will not want to come to you for the big issues, or if something serious is happening like abuse or bullying. Children and young people want the adults to notice when things are going wrong and to take action before they have to speak up. So if a child or young person is showing signs that they're experiencing harm, then it's our job as adults to speak up and share those concerns and take action to keep the young person safe. Children need us to be adults who have strong professional boundaries. So we're being very clear with them, and we're making sure that we're respecting our role as a professional who is providing services or working with them. We're keeping ourselves informed about risks, and we're making sure that we know how to help if there is a problem. Children and young people want us to be proactive. Now I can't make the slide go. Oh, here we go. All right, so I feel like I've done a lot of talking about the standards without actually showing you what they are. So here are the 10 child-safe standards. So for the ACT, our standards do mirror the national principles for child-safe organisations, and they focus on that child safety, but also rights and well-being. Now, in addition to the 10 standards, there is a culturally safe and inclusive practice preamble that is intended to frame the implementation of all the standards. So while the preamble isn't mandated by law, it does respond to expectations that were set by community and, things that were raised during the community consultation phase of the standards. Can you download the poster? Yes, we do have posters. You can absolutely download them. I'll get to that. Yes, so the standards do cover a range of things. So we've got standard 1, which is around that organisational leadership and culture. And then we go through things like engaging with children and young people and their families, staff training, staff capability, handling complaints, safe environments, strong policies and procedures, and how we review and improve as we go. So absolutely, we have posters. It doesn't look explicitly like this one. We have a child safe standard poster that is these exact words, but it looks visually a little different. We also have a simplified, more child-friendly version. So you can find both of those on our website under resources. Now, often we put the standards up and it may feel like, well, I don't actually know what that means. So we're going to run through some examples shortly, but I guess, you know, in the simplest, getting started is around having those robust and clear policies and guidelines for how your staff and volunteers interact with children and young people. So our staff screening and recruitment processes and a strong code of conduct and training for your staff about child safety and appropriate behaviour is critical. We've got to make sure that our staff understand children's rights and make every attempt to support children and young people to have their say and participate in decisions that impact them. This doesn't have to be, you know, a big formal consultation process. It is more about the everyday. And then the other kind of critical piece is, you know, the structures that ensure that staff, children and families are all encouraged, empowered and supported to speak up and raise concerns. And then those concerns are actioned and managed appropriately. So whilst the 10 standards are interrelated and, you know, they're not linear, we don't start at 1 and go to 10 necessarily, we have made an attempt to try and simplify it for you. So to understand how the standards fit together, it can be helpful to consider them across our 4 focus areas. Now, we came up with these focus areas to help guide you on the kind of actions and tasks that sit close together or that complement each other. We've got a self-assessment, the Child Safe Standards self-assessment available on our website, and it is structured around these 4 focus areas to try and assist you to consider how child safe practices and actions sit together and identify which priority areas are going to be a good place for you to get started on. Now, focus area 1, which is our green box, is about ensuring that leadership, culture, governance and environments are child safe. So this is about considering risk, setting clear policies, practices and expectations and communicating those out really clearly. Focus area 2, our yellow box, is about ensuring that you're finding opportunities to involve children and young people in decision making, keeping families informed about child safety and embracing children and young people's diversity, including ensuring that diverse needs are respected and they're accommodated and valued. Focus area 3 is really about your staff. So how you recruit your staff, what screening and training you are giving them, and how you are ensuring that they absolutely understand their responsibilities and are equipped to keep children safe. It's also about ensuring that complaints processes are child friendly and any complaints received are handled appropriately. And then finally, our red box, focus area 4, is about continuous improvement and ensuring that you are being explicit in how you review and improve your practice over time. So when we get started, we use these focus areas to help you to assess your progress, your current culture, your behaviours and your practices, and reflect on what the next step might be for you. As I said, the self-assessment is available on our website, and in addition to our full self-assessment, we have a small business checklist, which is a simplified version again. Okay, so we're going to dive a bit deeper now into what the standards actually look like and some examples. So focus area 1, which covers standard 1, standard 8 and standard 10. So under standard 1, we want our organisation to have something like a commitment statement or a child safe policy and really be clear about having expectations written down. We want other visible signs as well. So leaders that are promoting a child safe culture and they're talking about child safety up in our team meetings or our town halls, and they're role modeling those behaviours. Under standard 1, we need staff to have read their policies and understand what their code of conduct might say. And again, they're not shy about talking about safety. They're keeping those strict professional boundaries in all of their work, and they're making sure that child safety gets prioritised in the day-to-day. Standard 8 is really about risk. So the organisation needs to undertake a risk assessment. And I know most organisations will already be doing risk assessments, OH&S, various other governance risk. This is about putting child safety into that framework. You might choose to do that through, incorporating it into your enterprise level risk processes, or you might do a standalone child safety risk assessment. For Standard 8, for staff, this is often about supervision. So making sure that where you are working directly with children and young people, we are providing adequate supervision for the children, and we are keeping things like our outdoor spaces, any toileting or sleep rest spaces, we are keeping those safe, and we are minimising the opportunity that somebody with ill intent has access to children to create harm. And standard 10 is our policies and procedures. So we want those policies and procedures to be clear and practical and inclusive. They're written down, they're communicated, they're shared with family, staff. They're not just collecting dust up on the shelf. Okay, so focus area 2, we have standards 2, standards 3, and standards 4. So standard 2 is our engagement with children, and we want to think about how you can make child safety visible for the children themselves. So this is including child-friendly formats of key documents and trying to promote information about safety. So if children know what they can expect from the adults and the organisation, then they are more likely to be able to identify if somebody is doing something that isn't in line with those expectations. We want staff to feel comfortable to regularly and openly discuss safety with children. So even in the smallest children in an early education centre, it is absolutely possible to have discussions about safety, body safety, appropriate conduct, how we be respectful, and make sure that we are upholding our rights. Standard 3 is about families. So this is ensuring that families and communities are informed and involved. So a key one of this is providing families with copies of your child safe policies and your how to report so that they know how to speak up if there is an issue. We want to communicate regularly back to the families about what we're doing to keep children safe and what our practices and expectations are for conduct, both staff conduct, children's conduct, and of course, other conduct if families are coming in and participating. We want to also provide a way for families to have a say about child safety and ensure that they are supported to talk to their own children about safety so that the children are receiving similar messages at home as they might be within your organisation. Standard 4 is about inclusion and diversity. So making sure that all children are supported and respected during their time with you. So this can be things like visual cues, making sure that we represent the diverse background, culture of young people who might be engaging in your services. And we've got explicit information, policies and procedures. We're making sure that children's needs are accommodating and we're celebrating their diversity. So this might be things like cultural activities into your programming or, posting on your social media and, recognizing days of significance that might be relevant to you. We, of course, also critically need to be role modelling inclusive practice. So ensuring that all of our staff know what it means to be inclusive and we're not letting, behaviours that might be racist or critical of people who have disability or come from the LGBTQI plus community. We're not using any sort of discriminatory language around in our organisations. That's never tolerated. Okay, so then focus area 3 is about standards 5, 6 and 7. So standard 5 is our staff recruitment and is about making sure that we have robust child safe recruitment practices. So it's more than just working with vulnerable people checks in place. We want to make sure that child safety messages and screening goes right through our recruitment practices. We're thinking about our code of conduct and ensuring that staff are getting the message about conduct right from day one. Our induction should be covering child safety explicitly. We do have on our website a fact sheet about recruitment with some ideas and suggestions of how you can put child safe screening right through your full life cycle of recruitment. So jump onto the resources section if you would like to know more about this. Of course, it's always a partnership. So for Standard 5, staff also have a role in making sure that they are keeping their Working with Vulnerable People check current if they need one, they're attending induction, and they're asking questions to make sure that they feel confident about applying child safe practices in their day-to-day work. Standard 6 is about child safe complaints. So this is about ensuring that clear information about complaints in a variety of formats is regularly communicated to staff and to parents and to children. We want to make sure that all staff know how to respond if a concern is raised, and they also know how to speak up if they see something that is of concern. This goes for young people and parents too. We want to make our organisation one where there is no fear about speaking up and that there is confidence that all concerns will get taken seriously and that children will be supported and protected through any complaint process. So we don't want to make it a situation. We know it's difficult if we've got a potential abuse allegation happening in our organisation, but we need to take steps to make sure that our processes are not going to be so traumatic that no child would be able to cope with the process. Standard 7 is about our staff capability. So this is where we want to have some form of dedicated child safety training, or at least including child safety as a topic in some, one of your training elsewhere. We want to support all staff to attend or complete this. It's not just about having, those frontline staff, because often it can be the staff who aren't frontline every day who are most likely to recognise when things feel a bit off. Staff should always be attending training if they're offered it, and we want our staff to feel confident that they are able to recognise when something is maybe not right, including learning the signs that a child might be feeling unsafe. And then finally, our focus area 4 is just one little standard on its own, which is standard 9, and this is about continuous improvement. So we want to think about the standards as that continuous improvement process where leaders and staff are actively reflecting and reviewing how things are going, and they're getting feedback along the way, and they're learning from complaints or incidents. So this means that your organisation should have a process for reviewing and updating things like policies and procedures. You should also be thinking about how you review and update your day-to-day practice. So if you've got a set of procedures and policies that sit up on the shelf and staff say, well, we don't actually do it like that, that's just what the piece of paper says, then that means you need to update your procedures. So we want our procedures to be practical and useful, because if we let them slide and we say, well, we don't do it like that because it's too tricky, then we are opening the door for people to interpret and apply behaviours that might be starting to slip into some unsafe territory. You also need to be making sure that you're completing a bit of a review of your progress against the child safe standards. So the standards are not something that it's not a checklist that we tick off and then go, great, we've done standards, we can move on to something else now. And in that sense, there's probably quite a lot of parallels for things like work health and safety. Along the way for review and improvement, we would always advocate that you're doing consultation with staff, with families and children, and about how safety can be improved. And if you do work with children and young people, you may be very surprised if you actually ask them what you could do to keep them safe. Sometimes they can come up with some really brilliant suggestions. All right, now, as I said, we do have the self-assessment on our checklists on our website, but there is also a practical guide that is now online on our website, and it runs through the child safe standards, and it has again more practical ideas, particularly aimed at staff and volunteers, about what they can do to implement the standards in their day-to-day work. So go and have a look at that one if you would like some more ideas. Okay, so one of the key steps when you're starting implementation of the standards is to think about how your organisation interacts with children and to use that risk assessment to really consider the context that risk and harm to children and young people might occur. So on the slide, there's some questions that you can work through if you wanted to get started. And I encourage you to take a picture of this or reach out to me if you would like a copy of the slides. There is also an excellent guide to risk assessment on the National Office for Child Safety's website. So some good questions to get started and think about what you might need to do is, how does your organisation interact with children and young people? So this is things like, do we have face-to-face contact? Is there a need for physical touch? What high-risk activities do we have? Are we a child care centre that has personal care and nappy changing requirements? Or are we a place that might have quite low supervision of children currently? Question 2 is, how do you keep children and young people safe and well through your actions? So this is, what are you already doing to keep children and young people safe? And is this enough to address those higher risk activities that you might have identified in question 1? So it's also about ensuring that everybody in your organisation understands what you are doing to keep children and young people safe, and they understand their role in implementing that. Question number 3 is, how can you improve your services by engaging and involving children and young people? So often we see that organisations don't take the time to engage meaningfully, or they feel that this is an overwhelming process. Okay, but it doesn't have to be hard, and it doesn't have to be time consuming. And as I said, it doesn't have to be, a formal consultation process designed by a child engagement specialist. It can be as simple as finding those everyday ways of asking children and young people, their families and their communities, how they might like to be involved, what they want to be involved in, and what they think about certain topics. We do have some resources on our website about engaging with children and young people. Again, head to our resources section. Okay, question number 4 is about our vendors and suppliers. So who do we have on our site or in our facilities that might also interact with children and young people? So often we do a great job of ensuring that our core staff get that training and they have a code of conduct, and they come to our team meetings. But then we have all these other people who might be around. So casual staff, contractors, suppliers, the gardener, and those people often get overlooked. But it is important to consider everyone and recognise that when a child and young person is in our care, then we have a duty of care to keep them safe. And that includes ensuring that the people, anybody around them, is aware and is applying the standards. And then finally, how do we monitor and keep improving? So We want to consider how we create those feedback loops that allow us to learn as we go and get that input from the ground up and the top down. Okay, so that's all well and good, but I know that many of you are looking for some tangible ideas or steps that you can take. So we like to say that being visible is a great step. So sharing some sort of public commitment statement or getting posters up on the wall is a great signal to your staff, children, families, and anybody that's around your organisation that this is something that you take seriously. It is important to remember that there's not a right way to do the child safe standards, but there are some key approaches that many organisations will find successful. So one approach is to start with the things that you're already doing and to build on those strengths. Choose a few key standards that are particularly relevant and focus on getting those really well. So for example, if you're already doing some level of staff screening or working with vulnerable people checks, you might look at boosting this to include explicit references to child safety in your recruitment processes, asking questions, doing interviews, making sure that your training is now mandatory for everybody. The other approach is a risk-based approach. So organisations might look at where their highest risks are, or they might perhaps look at the standards which they have the most gaps in, and they just start there and take small steps to get started. Of course, undertaking a self-assessment can be a great way to kind of identify those gaps as well as those strengths. And we always recommend that you try and have a bit of a plan around what you're doing. So create some sort of implementation plan or checklist to go, right, we're going to start with, updating our policies. We're going to put some focus on recruitment, and we're going to look at how we can involve children and young people. Those are our 3 goals for, this quarter. As I said, training and working with your staff is often critical. And we know that the standards are primarily about shifting culture, and often getting training and awareness raising activities happening for your staff, volunteers, children and families is a good way to really start to get that culture moving. Unfortunately, at the moment, our office doesn't have a publicly available training module, but I would recommend the Australian Human Rights Commission that has training modules on the standards. They have a summary one of all 10 standards, and then they have individual ones on each standard. So depending on who your staff are, you can recommend them those. For those online, I know there are a few of you who are here from the ACT government. We do have an introductory e-learning which is already available on HRIMS. We do hope to make this publicly available soon, and we will let you know when we do, but if you're from the ACT government, that is already available to you and your teams. As I've mentioned throughout today's presentation, we do have a number of resources, so guidelines and fact sheets, some short videos that are up on our website, and you can jump on and use those. There are also plenty of resources out there from both the National Office and other jurisdictions who are doing standards. So if you plug child safe standards into Google, you will probably be surprised at how many ideas you are able to come up with. But of course, our job at the ACT Human Rights Commission is to help you. So you are welcome to get in touch with us to discuss your needs. And I guess I always like to finish this slide by saying it is the most important thing really is just to get started somewhere. So it doesn't matter where, but just get started, start having those conversations with your leaders and your staff about what this means for you. So in terms of leaders, we often find we have a few leaders on the calls, but those in leadership roles, there's some key things that you can do personally that will help your implementation significantly. And the first one of those is role modeling. So personally role model the right behaviours. So, you know, if you are out on the floor, you are taking the time to listen to children and young people and show that they matter. You're using inclusive language. You're being really appropriate in your behaviour. You want to focus on culture, so leading that culture where child safety is a priority, and we're communicating that often. We know that staff look to their leaders to set the tone, and your actions will have more impact than words. So we can stand up and say child safety is a priority, but if we don't then take further action to support this, your staff will quickly feel that this was just a token statement. Communicate. So communicate frequently, make sure that child safety comes up often and in a variety of ways. That really helps that culture. Integrate. So we want to make sure that the child safe standards are integrated in everything that we do. So we don't want a set of policies that sit off to the side. We don't want this, you know, child safe work or child safe champion who sits around only thinking about the one thing. We need this to become every day. Like work health and safety is, child safety should become, you know, a normal part of business. We want to support the implementation. So this means that you're supporting action plans to be developed, you're prioritizing those, you're allocating resources to ensure success. We know businesses, you know, don't have millions of dollars sitting out here ready to, you know, deploy and employ, you know, a team of child safe champions or consultants. But if we don't have a plan and we're not allocating time and, you know, staff who can help move that along, we know that it's not going to be successful. So you need to do what you can based on the size of your organisation and try to consider it preventative work. It is far, far more efficient to prevent harm from happening than to deal with what comes if child abuse is to be identified as happening in your organisation. And then finally, a key thing is accessibility. So we want to make sure as leaders that, again, we're role modeling and we're making sure that those child safe resources are accessible to everybody. So staff, of course, and not all staff have the same communication styles. So make sure that we are delivering our messages in a variety of ways, channels, and formats. All right, we know, of course, as leaders, you can't do it alone though. So make sure that you are showing your staff that this is important and you are taking the lead in that zero tolerance approach to ensure that, yeah, abuse, discrimination, harm is stamped out in your organisation. I've probably talked a lot about resources already, so we'll skip through this slide, but just so you know that it is there, we do have a dedicated page on our website. You will all get a link to an email following today's webinar with some links, including the links to our resources page. As I said, there is plenty of other good information that is out there. And I do want to make a note here if you are working across jurisdictions. So if you're an organisation that's already operating in New South Wales and you are meeting the requirements of the New South Wales Child Safe Standards Scheme, then you will also be deemed to be, you know, implementing the child safe standards here. So the only real difference is that here in the ACT, we do have that child rights focused. So if you have already done the standards or the national principles and you're thinking, I'm not sure I need to do anything else, I would encourage you to just have a think about child rights and also the cultural inclusivity preamble. All right, questions. We've got about 5 minutes. I did see a question early on. Let me just scroll back. Do child safe standards apply to ACT police, ACT DPP, administrative parts of ACT courts? Look, in my opinion, yes, they would absolutely provide services to the child safe standards would absolutely apply to police. I know that emergency services and justice is included as within the scheme. So if there was any concern or pushback, of course, we always encourage organisations to get their own legal advice, but broadly, yes, emergency services, justice is included in child safe standards. I did have questions about posters, so yes, absolutely, posters are there for download. We also have hard copies of posters, so if you would like posters for your organisation and you want them printed nice and shiny, you are welcome to send an email to actchildsafe@act.gov.au and we will get a copy delivered out to you. We did also have a couple of questions asked in advance. So I had one about compliance and regulators. So as I covered earlier, there isn't a formal compliance scheme for the first 5 years of the child safe standards. So, you know, there's no audits, there's no reporting requirements, but we are working with existing regulators. So we do work with the Access Canberra, who implement the Working with Vulnerable People scheme, the ACT Ombudsman for reportable conduct, and of course those sector-based regulators like Teacher Quality Institute, Seeker, etc. So we are able to share information and we can proactively reach out to organisations that we feel might need a bit of extra help. I did also have one further question about the preamble and explicit reference to LGBTQI+. So the preamble is intended to frame all of the standards. So we should be thinking about inclusivity and supporting diversity. And yes, in the ACT, this is all forms of diversity. So that was intentional. It's not just Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, though of course they are a very important group that we need to make sure we are being aware of. But yes, LGBTQI+, disability, cultural and linguistic diversity, neurodiversity, all of these types do fit into what the preamble is intended to cover. And we do actually have a webinar coming up on the 13th of April that relates to how you can support LGBTQI plus children and young people in your delivery of the child safe standards. Those were our pre-recorded questions. Were there any further questions in the chat or the Q&A that people had? Nope. All right, very good. As I said, if you do have a question at any time, you can contact our organisation, reach out to us via email. We do also have you know, a request on a place on our website where you can request further support, including training, so you are welcome to reach out to us. I did want to thank you all for your time today. We have spent quite a bit of time discussing the child safe standards and how those standards can provide a framework for preventing harm. And I know I have talked a lot about how adults and organisations can be child safe, and that focus on engaging with children and making sure our culture is strong. The child safe standards are legislated, so while there isn't a compliance mechanism, it is important to know that this is a legal obligation that exists, and we are expecting that organisations get started. So we're not going to come and knock on your door and say you're here for an audit to see that you've done all 10, but you must get started on the child safe standards. We are here to support you, and you're welcome to contact us for anything. Up on the screen, I have our satisfaction survey. You are welcome to click that QR code. We would love your feedback on today's webinar. We do also have 2 further webinars coming up, which might be of interest to you. So as I mentioned, supporting LGBTQI+ children and young people is on the 13th of April. And we have one on the child safe standards and reportable conduct on the 21st of April. So more details on these, including the links to register, will be in your follow-up email, which should come out probably tomorrow. We do also have a survey that relates to the Child Safe Standards, which is currently live. Now, this survey is an opportunity for you to tell us about what you already know or what you're already doing and what else you need. So we use this survey to shape what webinars we deliver, what resources we create. So we would love you to complete our survey and tell us how you are going. And really that's it for today. So thank you for your time. I hope that today has been helpful. If you would like a copy of the slides, please send an email. I know many of you have dropped it in the chat, so for those that have done it there, I will make sure to get that out to you. Just a quick reminder for today. We've got a bit of a trick to our system that I do need you to all make sure you leave or end call, hit the red button on your screen, but once I hang up, because otherwise it keeps the recording going for 24 hours. So please do hit the red button on exit. All right, thank you all very much for your time. And yes, please contact our team if you need anything else. Thank you very much.